Welcome to the Capitalist Corner, everybody. I am your host, Michael Liebowitz, the most consistent of us, because you see, I'm here every day. Mark Pellegrino somewhere thinking he has to make a living, I guess, filming, Hollywood, all that kind of stuff. But luckily, Jim Valliant is not so bougie. I reached out to him and he had no excuses about making movies or anything. And he just dove right in. And Jim was not feeling well this morning. So it turns out Jim is highly intoxicated right now. He's all drugged up, but we've got him here.
It's true. Kind of 3 feet to the wind right now, so you're going to get what you get.
Right. So we've got an intoxicated Jim Valliant, kind of a tired Michael Liebowitz, but we're going to do our best, folks. As usual, the views we express are not necessarily indicative of the American Capitalist Party. I am the vice chairman of the American Capitalist Party. Jim is our informal legal advisor. And also, you can check out my show, The Rational Egoist. We got a great episode coming out tomorrow on Christianity. I think you're really going to like that. I want to tell you, Jim, a couple things. So I go this weekend, Saturday, I drove out to Boston because Mark was going to be there. He's signing autographs and, that sort of thing.
Galas, premieres,
yeah. So the first thing that happens is, and this must happen to everybody, or at least a lot of people. My GPS tells me take a left, but I look and there's like 3 different options that I can go left. So I don't know. I'm like, what the hell? And then it says, and then take a sharp right. And meanwhile, there's people behind me and I don't know what the hell they're doing. So I took it. And then all of a sudden my GPS changes from 4 minutes to 10 minutes. So I know I did something wrong. And I look and I'm on the highway and it says 10 miles to U-turn to Boston. So they've actually got it set up to take a U-turn, which tells me that this is a common mistake. But my bad luck doesn't end there. I get to the place and 8:45, 9 o'clock. And I'm sitting there in front and everybody's going in, but I'm not going in because I don't have a ticket. I'm completely dependent on when Mark comes. And somebody that works there says, can I help you, with something? And I said, well, I'm waiting for my friend. And then I'm like, well, that sounds suspicious. So now I try to clean it up. And I said, yeah, my friend is one of the celebrities. And then I realized that probably sounds even more ridiculous. So meanwhile, Mark texts me and he says, he tells me where he is. So I look it up and he says he's going to leave at 9:45. It's about 20 after 9 at this point, and it says it's a half an hour walk. So I said, you know what, I'm going to walk there and then I'll just come back with Mark. And I figured, even though the time says 9:51, I can walk pretty quickly, maybe do a little jogging. And so I do that. And I'm looking at the phone and the time's coming down and I'm so excited. I can't wait. And then I get to this thing and it says, take a left onto the path. And what the fuck is the path? What does that even mean? So I get there and sure enough, I see there's a path. I start going down and then it says, take a right on Kingston Street. I don't see a Kingston Street anywhere. And the thing with Boston is everybody that I ask, nobody's from Boston. So nobody knows how to get there. In the meantime, I get a text from Mark and it says, listen, I'm just going to come downstairs because I know you get confused. He tells me because I was supposed to go to. I said, confused? I'm lost. I'm in Chinatown. I don't know where the hell I am. I have no clue what to do. Luckily, I finagled my way. I figured it out. And he says to me, listen, I'm in the street. I'm jumping up and down. So I look, I see him, he's jumping, I get excited. Okay. And we get to the convention. And then when you go to these things, they got to give, they give me a badge that says that I'm okay to be in there. What's it called? They got a name for these things.
Badge?
No, not lectern. I forget what the hell they are, but there's a name for these things you put around your neck. And I go sit down and I look at this thing and it says Mark Pellegrino's companion.
Ooh.
I said, lanyard. Yes, Lee, lanyard. I said, companion? I'm not a companion. What do you mean, companion?
Well, in certain ancient languages, companion means spouse.
Yeah, and then someone comes over and says, listen, I know what a handler does, but what does a companion do?
What does a companion do?
Now, but the funny thing is, Jim, a couple of years ago when I got the job as the spokesperson for the Libertarian Party of Connecticut, they interviewed me in the Hartford Courant. And they were asking me about my time in prison. And I said, well, I got, my friend Brett McCall, he was my cellmate for 11 years. they put in the Hartford Courant Brent McCall, who was Michael's soulmate for 11 years. Soulmate. So when I told Brent about the, the companion issue, Brent says, well, I'm a little offended by this because I thought you were my soulmate.
You're cheating on your soulmate.
Yes, with my new companion.
It's important to have meaningful, long-term, intimate relationships.
But it was a blast. As Mark's signing autographs, I'm polling the conference goers, asking them what color Mark's hair is. And there were two redheads right next to me. One of the redheads said, yes, that's red hair. But what happened was the people figured out Mark didn't want to be known as a redhead. So now they're just telling him what he wants to. They're feeding him bullshit, telling him what he wants to hear. I'm saying, no way, dude. And this is so much. Then he says to me, you should go on Jeopardy. And he says this in front of his two handlers. And I said, well, Mark, I think there might be an issue with that. They, maybe don't want me on. Oh. And I said, and the women are looking like, what, why? And so I said, do you want me to, can I tell them? And he said, sure. So then I got to tell them all about my criminal history, my time in prison, and my friendship with Jim Valliant and Mark Pellegrino. So all in all, it was a really, really, really fun time. That sounds
cool.
It was. But now we're going to get to some serious stuff here. As serious as you can take, Candace Owens, because let's be honest.
Yes. Serious used in the loosest sense of the term.
Yes. So Candace Owens puts a post on X, and I'm so eager to get your take on this one, Jim. It says, some people will realize that someday, it says, people will realize that the Enlightenment, and she has, the quotations around it, was actually a Freemasonic darkening of mankind. They have been lying about science, technology, and most importantly, our history. And artificial intelligence is their next big effort. So, Jim, go.
Wow. It's a Freemason conspiracy, first of all, which shows that this woman is absolutely not serious and a lunatic, the Freemason conspiracy. Now, it's true that there were Freemason societies that were pro-progress and enlightenment. Many of our founding fathers were Freemasons, for example. Freemason does not necessarily imply belonging to a cult. For God's sake, my great uncle was a whatever degree Freemason. Believe it or not, this is just a social group of, social club in effect, different branches and varieties, but they don't, any more than the Jews run the world, the Freemasons have not been engineering history. Okay, so first get her nutty conspiracy theory out of the way. This bitch does not deserve the civilization she lives in. Okay? What has happened to humanity since the Enlightenment is the greatest thing that ever happened to humanity in the anthropological course of our history as a species, as Homo sapiens species on this planet. What has happened to us in the last 300 or 400 years since what we call the Age of Reason and the Enlightenment has occurred. Science is a scam. She doesn't deserve any medicine. Science is a scam. Well, of course, she thinks space is gay and fake, and so I guess we never got to space. But she doesn't deserve the skyscrapers, the cars, the medicine, you name it, that she enjoys today and makes her life so great. Because if she went in a time machine more than, say, 350 years back in the past, her life would be nasty, brutish, and short, if I can steal the line from Thomas Hobbes. The science of Newton, in physics, the chemistry of Lavoisier, the biological insights of, think of it, in the 19th century, men like Louis Pasteur, who developed germ theory. We were talking about, for our recording for The Rational Egoist yesterday.
Jim, don't spill the beans, Jim.
I know, but inoculations, doesn't deserve, and then, of course, all of the huge, tremendous economic innovations, the application of the steam engine, just to start out the Enlightenment, or the United States of America. This woman is anti-American on the face of it. If you want to read one important thing, read the chapter from Dr. Leonard Peikoff's book, The Ominous Parallels, The Nation of the Enlightenment. The United States could not have been made possible but for the unique philosophical, now we're setting aside even science and technology and the Industrial Revolution, little things like that. But the United States of goddamn America would not exist but for the philosophers of the Enlightenment, men like John Locke, Montesquieu, people like that. The emergence of economics under Adam Smith, I know for all of the flaws of classical economics, nonetheless, economics began to emerge as a science. History transformed from a literary exercise into a science during the Enlightenment. The United States of America was created on Enlightenment ideas: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, representative government. All of these ideas really gained the opposition to slavery. The first serious, real arguments that would put an end to slavery as a moral ideal in people's minds occurred during the Enlightenment. So everything, I'd say about, 90% of the good stuff that has happened since ancient Greece happened during the European Enlightenment, and the results in America as a result of that. So this woman deserves to be gnawing on a bone in a cave someplace, because she opposes reason, science, technology, freedom, economic and political liberalism, including freedom of speech, the opposition to slavery, the Industrial Revolution, all made possible by the Enlightenment. This bitch does not deserve the civilization she lives in.
We are going to get, listen, I'm telling you right now, stoned Jim Valliant is going to be in such high demand after that diatribe. That's great. That was awesome. You throwing the bitch word around, the goddamn it's around. You were on fire. That was awesome. You know, I actually, when I saw that on X this morning, Jim, no, bring it up. We need more of this.
Bring it up.
I put a post this morning with that, and I said, who thinks Candace should just go back and live as a medieval Christian? Do away with her podcast, her social media. Just go live like that. Who's stopping you?
Yeah, today the conservatives want to take us back to the medieval period, and the environmentalist leftists want to take us back to the Pleistocene. It is only capitalism. People who advocate capitalism, ladies and gentlemen, the title of the podcast here, The Capitalist Corner. Only people who advocate capitalism actually advocate the progress of humanity, the advancement of humanity, whether it's through science or political liberalism, or you name it, the improvement of humankind's very existence on this planet, our lifespan, our numbers. We live, as ordinary Americans, we live better than Louis XIV could have possibly imagined. The absolute ruler of the richest country in Europe in the 17th century, France. We have better entertainment. We have a higher quality of food, a better variety of food, a better standard for our, the germ-free food. Our food is better and of greater variety. We don't suffer periodic famines, as was
the women are hotter.
The women are hotter because her health is better. There's no question about it. Women were some of the great beneficiaries of the Industrial Revolution. It wasn't men so much oppressing women. It was the natural division of labor. If they were sexually active, they just get pregnant every other year for their fertile years. And that pretty much put them down. With the advent of the Industrial Revolution, that had more to do with liberating women. With the advent of birth control and female hygiene, had great example. Women are hotter and, by the way, freer thanks to the Industrial Revolution and the Enlightenment. No question about it. But, our entertainment is better. Our medicine is better. More of the world is open to me for travel than Louis XIV could have possibly dreamed in his wildest imagination. I've got smartphones, microwave ovens, automobiles, things like a computer connection. Just holding my smartphone in my hand, I've got basically the knowledge of humanity, or at least most of it, at my fingertips anytime I want it. Look, the Enlightenment is the climax of the greatest thing to ever happen to our species on this planet.
Yeah, it's hard to tell, Jim, with these folks, if they're crazy, dumb, or just liars. It's a sad state of affairs, is what it is, that somebody like that would get any attention. And I know then people are going to say, well, you're giving her attention. Well, whether I'm talking about her or not, she's getting attention. The point is she's got like 1 million followers, probably even more. I don't know, more than that, but which means she has
all the cognitive apparatus to know better. So if that's the condition, I don't know her. I'm not going to psychologize. I'm not going to get into her, attachment disorders with her parents when she was a toddler or something. I have no idea, and I don't even want to guess. But do I know that she has the cognitive capacity to know better? Do I know that she's motivated by something very dishonest, a fanatical, religious, conspiracy theory oriented view of the world? Yes. Does she have the cognitive capacity to self-correct on that and all the information she needs on that? Absolutely. So she is morally reprehensible, in my view, for publicly, before you open your big fat mouth and you advocate something, you better go do some homework, Candace, and find out what the truth is, because what you're advocating would cause the suffering, immiseration, and death of millions upon millions of people if we went back to a pre-enlightenment world. She does not deserve the world she's living in or the internet she's using to a broad, talk about peak irony. She's using the internet of all things, which couldn't have been even possible but for the Enlightenment. She does not deserve even the platform that she's using to spread this evil nonsense. She is not an honest human being. Let me put it that way. She may be crazy. She may be dumb as rocks, but I do know she has the cognitive, wherewithal to know better. And that's all I need to know. She is not a good person.
This is gonna be great for Persephone. Like, if we had to write the headline, it'd be great. Jim Valliant gets stoned and goes off about Candace Owens, showing more cognitive capacity while intoxicated than she shows at her best. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So what about this story, Jim? And so let me give you a little background to the audience here. Donald Trump wants to move the homeless out of Washington, D.C. He says they're going to be shipped out. Where he's shipping them, I have no idea. But it's all predicated on the idea that there's a rampant crime in D.C. Now, it's true that a couple years ago there was a spike in crime, but now crime in D.C., it's been declining. It's actually at a 30-year low. But Trump, nevertheless, uses his normal scaremongering techniques to try to push an agenda. Now, I don't know what the solution is to the homeless, right? I'm not going to sit here and pretend to. I'm inclined to think that under a purely free market, there would be far more housing opportunities. There'd be far more charities to provide for such people, that sort of thing. But the idea that he's going to go and gather them up and ship them somewhere, it hits me the wrong way, Jim. What do you think about this?
Well, you don't compare. I mean, what you'd say is, look, let's get rid of litter to clean up DC. And he's treating homeless people, human beings, as if they're just like litter and you can just clear it out for city beautification. These are human beings, and you don't solve the problem by pushing it out of the district. Where are they going to go? They'll go to Baltimore. They'll go to, if I had my fantasy wish, they would go to some of the fancier suburbs around DC, because, there are some really high-end suburbs around DC with some really expensive homes. I've been to parties at homes. It's amazing. Is it how wealthy and elite some of these people, these longtime DC bureaucrats, how well they live. So in my fantasy, these leftist, bureaucrats would have to put up with the problem rather than leave the district to their fancy suburbs, as they often do. But no, you can't just get rid of the problem. You're the president of the United States, Mr. Trump. You can't get rid of the problem by shifting it out of your eyesight or the line of sight of tourists. Now, it is true that juvenile crime, you bring up many good points. Crime is actually down, and it's part of the longer term trend in crime coming down. But we do have some disturbing elements. We do have problems now with increased crime among repeat offenders and juvenile offenders. So even as the overall crime rate is coming down, there are certain areas of concern, and it is government's job to deal with crime. I'm not an anarchist. And many of these local DAs, with their no bail policy on violent crimes, or not putting people in prison when they personally use a firearm in the commission of a felony. For me, I'm in California. I was a California prosecutor for almost 18 years, and we had a little law called "Use a gun, go to prison." If you personally used a firearm in the commission of a felony, that's prison mandatory. And I don't, apparently, DAs are starting to ignore those kind of laws, and that will have a negative impact on recidivist violent criminals. And it will push the gangs, for example, into using young people, juveniles. So it doesn't help the homeless situation, to connect all the dots here, to let gangs fester, to let crime in certain areas become a problem, at least in regionally in certain areas. Chicago still hasn't gotten a handle on its absurd crime issue. I still, even you can cite crime statistics coming down, but you can't ignore certain regions. You can't ignore certain aspects of crime. Maybe it's my old prosecutor self coming out, but I'm still focused on that increase in juvenile violence, especially in urban areas. There's something.
But in Washington, Jim, I don't see that happen in Washington D.C. That's where he's saying is the.
Well, I don't know. I honestly haven't looked at the statistics recently, but when I did look at the statistics, I did see an overall trend of crime coming down, but there's still being a persistence and in fact, in some places, an increase in juvenile crime. Because let's face it, the way we treat 17, 16, 15-year-olds who commit violent crimes is not fair, in my view. I'd be a Mr. Tough prosecutor here. People like that should generally be given the same kind of sentences that adults get. In California, if you're treated like a juvenile, the worst penalty you could get is to go to California Youth Authority and be out by the age of 25.
Okay, so this is going to be great because we have one more real story that I really want to cover. And then Jim Valliant and I are going to argue for the rest of the time because he said a couple things in there that I disagree with so strongly and passionately that Jim is going to disagree. The audience is going to hate me. And we're really going to find out just how little I care what people think of me because I am going to... But except for my doctor, evidently. Before we get to the story, I was telling Jim before we came on, I had a physical this morning, and I was supposed to lose 10 pounds. Now, I'm not losing 10 pounds for my doctor. I was supposed to drop 10 pounds because of my cholesterol. I actually dropped 14, but then a week ago was my birthday, and so I gained 6 of it back because everybody wants to feed me everywhere I go. They couldn't just all get it in one place. Oh, have some cake, And I act like I'm hopeless in this situation, but I wasn't exactly running from the cake either. But nonetheless, so as I'm headed to the doctor this morning, I'm like, oh man, I got to explain to him how I didn't lose the whole thing, as if he's not my dad, he's not my school teacher. I'm not in any trouble, but nonetheless, that's the feeling I had. So I was a little concerned with his opinion. But okay, before Jim and I get into this Donnybrook. Jim, did you see the story I sent you about the kids, about the children, where this woman, she has her children running around. There's 3 of them and they're young and they're playing in the yard and whatnot. And these busybody neighbors are calling the police. These kids are running around unescorted outside.
She's been repeatedly approached by Child Protective Services.
Yeah, and it's just...
Let your kids play in the front yard.
Now, full disclosure, part of the problem is, I could say, well, I remember when I was a kid and I was running all over the place. The problem is I'm not a good example because I ended up in prison. So, someone could say, well, maybe that's not a good idea. But most kids... back then it turned out fine, who were relatively free. The other day, Jim, I was in Wethersfield, Connecticut, where I grew up, and I see this kid and he's riding his bike. That's nice, a kid riding his bike. And trailing behind him was his mom, following him in a car. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, what the hell are you teaching this kid? That the world is such an unsafe place, that that you can't even drive down the street on your bicycle without your mom following you in this automobile. Now, in reality, she's probably creating a more dangerous situation because now she's going extra slow down the street because he's got to be in front of her, and who knows what's coming, from behind. But this idea that, this helicopter parenting stuff, to me, you're just creating, in my view, a nation of wusses, basically.
Totally.
Scared people. But go ahead and give us your take, and then we'll argue about the other stuff.
Jesus, I'm over 60 years old now. So I was raised back in the Pleistocene era. But the point is that
with Mark.
with Mark, exactly, where we had to walk to school in the snow uphill both ways. Yeah. But the point is that my parents would be, I don't know, put in prison for child abuse or something today by the way they let us run around. My God. When I was a little kid, we were right on our house, abutted the LA River. I grew up in LA, and the LA River, those big concrete embankments that maybe you've seen in movies. This is where your homeless people hang out. This is where crime occurs. This is, not the nicest part of Los Angeles. But I would jump the fence, walk around in that area all over the place. One time I walked across one of these pipes across it. I'd take the Hyperion Bridge over to Elysian Park, up to Angeles Point, looks right over Chinatown and Dodger Stadium. I was walking around. By the time I could walk to elementary school, my parents had me walking to elementary school, blocks and blocks, so, all on my own without any parental supervision at all. Yeah, it is the worst thing you can do to a kid to over coddle them because they're not developing their own ability to deal with the world, their own confidence, their own confidence. Gosh, the self esteem that I got, I remember even kind of the first time I walked to school all on my own and kind of the sense of metaphysical efficacy I got, the earned self esteem. I can do this. Did weird things happen? Did I get maybe sometimes lucky because the worst things could have happened? Maybe, but man, we played outside. We played outside till it was dark. We played in the street. We were doing all kinds of crazy things that parents today apparently aren't permitted to do. This story showed them CPS repeatedly harassing these parents simply for letting them be kids. But
Yeah,
look,
they actually told the parents, your kids cannot be unsupervised in their bedrooms.
In their bedroom?
Until they're 13. They can't be left unsupervised. Now they have multiple children. There's 3 of them. You don't have to be, Einstein to know 2 parents, 3 kids. You can't be in the freaking bedroom with them at all times.
My parents would, if I climbed on the roof or something, my parents or my grandparents would yell at me, "I get down off the roof, Jimmy." But I mean, I would, would climb the roof. And yes, would they yell at me and stuff? But it would.
Now, you weren't stoned then, right?
No, I was. In fact, I was a pretty agile little kid, a pretty active one. But the point is, I could have broken my neck 100 times with the things that I did when I was a small child. I could have gotten to all kinds of trouble, unsupervised for hours at a time, out in the big, dangerous world. But I think it was a very healthy, moral, character building exercise. I really feel sorry for these kids. They're not developing. You wonder why they're not thinking for themselves, why they have absolutely no spine, how they have no basic confidence in dealing with. I heard this statistic about people taking their parents to job interviews. I mean, I would say something like that to my parents and they would start laughing. You wouldn't want me at your job interview. Of course I wouldn't want you at my job interview. If you bring your parent to a job interview and I'm the hiring guy, but you're not getting that job.
Hell no.
No.
You know what I would be thinking, Jim? What is this parent now going to be here watching my supervisory style? Like, what? Screw that. I don't need that in my life.
It's lunacy. It's lunacy. I think my immune system is stronger. I know my character is stronger because I grew up in a more savage time when we fended for ourselves as small kids. Don't get me wrong. My parents took me to the doctor, to the dentist. They made sure I had good education. They made sure I was clean. They provided a safe home for me. That's what a parent ought to do. And, they report, the hardest thing as a parent is to watch your little boy being active, running around, fall, skin his knee. Don't overreact. Let him pick himself up, dust himself off, and don't make a big deal of it. And they say that's a hard thing to do as a parent because your instinct is to rush in and, oh, my poor kid, he scraped his knee. But the best thing you can do for him is not to make a big deal of it. We'll just get up and keep going. That's character building. That's the building of an independent mind. I don't know what the hell is happening to the next generation here as these helicopter parents are, detail managing their kids' lives. That is not going to develop self-esteem, independence, inner confidence on the kid's part at all.
Jim, there seems to be people seem to want a risk-free existence. And I think that drives so many of our problems. You know, you have to have drug laws because otherwise, you know, people are just going to be shooting dope in high schools or whatever. So, you know, on a post I made in Connecticut here, they're banning kratom, which is like I don't know, an herbal supplement thing that, you know, it can be abused. Don't get me wrong. But nevertheless, you know, people want to use it. What the hell is the difference? It's actually outlawed in San Diego too, this kratom. And I posted about this because it made me so upset that they're banning this. Not because I use it. I would never use it. But if people want to, that's their fucking decision.
Yeah.
But somebody actually posted in response, children are getting hooked on this stuff or children are abusing it. And I'm just thinking, like, we cannot regulate our lives based on everything that's harmful to children or that children can get their hands on. There's no such thing as a risk-free life. It doesn't exist. So yes, you could let your kid go out on his bicycle or her bicycle and they get kidnapped. It's probably like a 1 in 10 million or so chance.
Yeah,
but it can happen, right?
Yeah.
It's a risk. But what is the other side of the ledger, right? What happens when you try to protect them from every risk on the planet? Then what actual harm are you causing?
Right. Well, first of all, you can't create a risk-free environment for your kids. Just get over it. Risk is an inherent part of life. In fact, you want to develop a confidence in rational risk taking. You want them to be able to take risks. Now, are there stupid risks that they ought not to be taking, and you should be advising them to not do? You know, don't play with broken glass. Don't run with the scissors in your hand. Obviously, you're giving your kids the best advice you can, and don't run out into traffic. Look both ways in a busy intersection. You know, that kind of stuff. Of course, it's basic safety stuff the parents teach, but it's got to be taught in the child to manage for them to start developing the ability to manage their own risk. And by the way, protecting children may be one thing, but they're going to ban it for adults every time too, because after all, geez, these children can get their hands on it. Well, that's for the parent to make sure that doesn't happen. So you monitor your kids, you monitor your kids' health, you monitor what your kids are doing, you ask them what they were up to. So I'm not saying don't be a responsible parent. On the other hand, it's something between the parent and the child's going to have to develop in this world the ability to manage their own risks in this very dangerous world. There are all manner of dangers, and frankly, street traffic. You know, getting hit by a car or something, or being involved in a traffic accident, you've got a much higher risk, say, than your kid being, say, kidnapped or something else like that. And in the process of protecting people from drugs, what we do is we atrophy that very thing. Okay, we've assigned to government, in effect, the protection, my safety from dangerous substances. No, you haven't. You haven't gotten rid of the dangerous substance. In fact, what you've done is you've put out a highly profitable product, more profitable because it's on the black market. So you've got aggressive promoters of it. People are going to promote it to kids. So the very attempt to try and make drugs illegal, for example, has increased the profit for it, has caused gangs to grow and fester. There aren't a lot of unemployed teenagers who can afford $1,000 firearms. It is that kind of a thing is the direct product of our war on drugs. Our war on drugs is what's killing people from impure drugs where you don't know the quantity. Because what are they? Street drugs. If I walk into a local pharmacy and I buy some aspirin, which is no more chemically complex than most of these drugs out there, you know, first of all, there's no huge motive for theft because the price is reasonable, and not only is the price a mere fraction of what illegal drugs are, I know the purity and the quantity. People could overdose on cold medicine. It rarely happens. Why? Because people know the quality and dosage when they can buy it over the counter at a pharmacy. Unlike these drugs that get laced with fentanyl or whatever else get put in there. And of course, you're encouraging more and more and more of it because the bang for the buck that these street dealers are going to get increases with the intensity of the drug. So suddenly fentanyl, it's when you have a legal drug, what happens to cigarettes and alcohol? You get lighter doses because it's legal. People don't want to get all twisted and fucked up when they're, so what they do is we'll get low alcohol, low nicotine, light cigarette. Okay, now we're going to give you a vape. This is the tendency with legal drugs. When it comes to illegal drugs, you go from marijuana to powdered cocaine to crack cocaine to methamphetamine to now fentanyl and God knows what. It gets the drugs get nastier, harder, harsher, and that is the tendency in a black market. It's part of the general principle, coming back to capitalism, part of the general principle that in a free society, reason tends to prevail. It doesn't always prevail, but when people are free and all transactions are voluntary, reason tends to prevail. When you put a gun to people's face and say, this substance is illegal, you will inevitably help criminals, profit organized crime, make the drug taking itself illegal, turn these pushers into really aggressive pushers, and make their drugs ever nastier and scarier and more uncertain. So, if there are a lot of young people dying from fentanyl, it is the direct result of government's war on drugs. It is not the result of some, sinister Fu Manchu plot from the Chinese.
It's the Jews and the Freemasons.
It's the Jews and the Freemasons. No, it's the war on drugs itself that makes drugs so dangerous and deadly and festers organized crime and street gangs in our country.
I interviewed, I think, a Jeffrey Singer from the Cato Institute, and he taught me something I had never previously known as the iron law of prohibition, that when you prohibit drugs, now in order to smuggle these drugs, they have to be small. And the more prohibited they are, the smaller they have to get. And the smaller they get, the more powerful they're going to be, because you have to compact more potency into a smaller, pill or whatever it is. So it actually runs counter to what they
put a little
want.
Fentanyl in there. Hey, let's put fentanyl.
Yes.
So they don't even know how much fentanyl they're taking with some unknown gut drug. That is exactly it. They cut drugs and and his general rule is absolutely correct. They need to get more economic bang for the buck. And if it's illegal and they need to, have a discrete, back in the late 80s and 90s, what they do is the dealers would put crack cocaine rocks in their mouth so that no one would be able to see it. You can't do that with pot. You can't do that with alcohol. Now, the prohibitions on alcohol and pot were bad enough, but what prohibition on those things tends to do when you regulate that is you tend to reduce it down to crack, rocks of crack cocaine that a dealer can hide in his mouth or elsewhere, so that he can conveniently sell them on the street.
In the prison wallet.
The prison wallet, exactly.
Well, Jim, I got to tell you, your speech, you've absolutely inspired me. When this show is over, I'm going to go get myself all hopped up on kratom, grab myself a pair of scissors, run across the street, and I'm not looking both ways. I'm just going right at it. We're going to see what happens.
And automatize that skill. If we don't teach our kids that they are responsible for their own safety and to be cautious and to have them do it, to have them manage their own risk, you're creating a dangerous situation for the kid. There's an analogous situation here, by the way. What you don't want to do is be over-regulated with a government, and you don't want to be over-hovering as a parent. What freedom helps create is moral character. It makes you think for yourself. It makes you assess the risk for yourself. It makes you be cautious when someone comes up to you and says, as I'm walking through Washington Square, I went to NYU, and every time I would cut the corner across Washington Square Park in Greenwich Village, how many times was I offered a variety of drugs? And you have to, it's true that wouldn't happen on a free market. The drugs would be in the pharmacies and stuff. But look, enduring risk, though, let's put it that way, having to make those decisions for yourself makes you be able to say, nah, I'm not going to use the meth or the crack. And that stuff looks like it's nasty shit and it really fucks people up. So I'm not going to try that stuff.
But don't you want to be cool?
Yeah, I did when I was a kid. I guess want to be cool to some extent, but I'm not going to pretend that I was a little Howard Rourke as a teenager, and yeah, but because I sure wasn't. But on the other hand, cool. What at what price? Cool. You know what I mean?
Yes. Okay. Now back to this bail thing, Jim, that you mentioned. A lot of people make this argument nowadays, and I'm not ascribing it to you, but I do put your argument as part of the broader sort of position. The argument is that people now can commit crimes and they're not, they're given bail that they can make, they get out and they're free to commit more and more crimes, and that we should either give them no bail at all or keep their bail so high that they can't make it, because then that will keep them incarcerated and they won't be committing more crimes. So is that your position when it comes to bail or anything close to it?
I do believe in bail. I am not one of these no bail people. And when it comes to crimes of violence, I think we should have bail. When people have long criminal records, especially recent long criminal records, there should be bail. I'm an advocate of, I mean, God knows how many thousands of bail hearings, arraignments and post-arraignment bail hearings that I attended, where, obviously, if a person isn't a serious criminal or their crimes are minor or it looks like they will come back to court easily, that's one thing. But if someone has I worked in the domestic violence unit, for example. If someone has 2 pending charges of, let's say, moderate DV, well, the thing about DV, domestic violence, is the woman will call 911. The guy will get arrested. They'll see the injuries on her. They'll take him away. It's pretty clear what happened. And guess what happens? The next day, the day after, the woman comes in and says, "Mr. Valliant, please drop the charges. I need him home for the kids. I need him home."
Yeah.
And so did the violence not happen? The violence happened. They'll come in, and in the worst cases, they'll come in with a broken jaw or on crutches or in a cast or something. And I'll say, the next time it's going to be worse. It could be death. And so there I am sitting at a bail hearing with a guy who, last night or the night before last, beat the crap out of his wife when he was drunk or on meth. That's the way it commonly goes here. Am I just supposed to let him out so that he can do it again? Well, let's see, by midnight tonight, the cops will be there separating them from a bloody drunken fight one more time. No, there are certain patterns you can develop when you have this experience and see which guys are a greater risk of reoffense, which guys are dangerous to let out. So I think we should use discretion when it comes to setting bail. And does it favor rich people? Yeah, it favors rich people. But rich people at least will come back to court and we've gotten their attention. When you go to a system that doesn't have bail for crimes of violence, you are inviting the guy to flee the local jurisdiction and continue his crime spree elsewhere. And we've seen that again and again.
Okay.
Even in the context of declining crime, Michael.
So I don't have an issue with the idea that somebody is required to make bail. In other words, they're not just getting a PTA, a promise to appear. I don't have any issue with saying you have to post bail because we need to have some insurance that you're going to show up for court. Because that's the idea. You put forth this money, and then that stands in, okay, well, you want your money back.
Bail bondsman will post the bail if you only have like 10% of the.
Sure, and the bondsman will make sure you're in court, but by the use of bounty hunters. But what you seem to be talking about is using bail of a high nature to ensure that the person cannot get out to commit crimes.
I want to keep them in for at least a little while.
Okay.
Take him to take time, just even if he's going to make bail, the time it'll take him to gather the bail up will put a whole different spin on it.
See, to me, Jim, this runs afoul of 2 of the bedrock principles of our criminal justice system. One, that you are presumed innocent until proven guilty. That's first of all. So if you are saying we're going to keep you in jail because you've committed a crime before you've been proven guilty, then you're saying you're not innocent until proven guilty. And then the other part of this here is, and you might be familiar with this, I'm pretty sure you are, but we're going to go just to check, that excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted.
Okay, so the founding fathers give a big endorsement to the concept of bail.
Yeah, I
Okay,
agree
so
with bail,
bail is
but
perfectly
if you're using bail to keep somebody from getting
Well,
out
wait a
of
minute.
prison,
To
it's excessive.
arrest our fellow here, the police needed probable cause. In other
Yes.
words, they had to have evidence that the guy probably committed the crime. Me as a prosecutor, I don't file the charge unless I already see that we've got evidence to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, it is true that it is a cop's assessment of probable cause and a prosecutor's assessment of beyond a reasonable doubt just in filing the charge. But if you
Probable
have
cause is not conviction, Jim. It's not the same
it
thing.
absolutely is not. But when a prosecutor files charges, that is a higher level of protection. And what do you get? At a bail hearing, you can have in nearly every jurisdiction, when there was bail back when I was a prosecutor, we had bail. You could have a probable cause hearing right away. Or if it's a felony, you would have a preliminary hearing within 10 court days of your arraignment.
Yeah, that's
Those
all
things
great.
flesh out the evidence in front of a judge to see whether or not there actually was probable cause or enough reason to go forth with a felony jury trial.
Yeah, Jim, once you have even once the judge finds probable cause for you to be charged, you are still by law presumed innocent.
That's of course true.
That so
You have
if
a
you
right to
are
a jury trial.
presumed innocent and you're raising that person's bond to such an extent,
Okay,
not to
so we're
make
going
sure
to
they
let a
come to
serial
court.
killer stay on the street. There are cases where I believe in no bail at all. You keep in.
Exactly. So you're saying that the principle is what's important here. We're
Mhm.
not pragmatists. The principle of innocent until proven guilty holds sway, even though there's it's riskier, as we talked about before, that sometimes there is
You're never
risk.
going to convince me to let a murderer out who just
But
killed
he's not convicted of
or
murder
a
yet.
serial. That's right. I'm not going to take the chance if we have probable cause on a serial rapist to let him out until
Yeah,
trial.
Jim.
I'm not going to
Since
look at
yeah,
some new
you know
rape
what you just
victim
did,
in the
Jim.
face and
Since
say,
we
okay,
studied
well,
logical
it's been in
fallacies,
prison.
what logical fallacy? What logical fallacy are you guilty of right in this very moment? When you just did that, what is that logical fallacy? And I think you know.
The logical fallacy of correctly using odds.
No, the logical fallacy of appeal to emotion.
No,
Yes,
no.
you got all worked up, you got all lathered
Clearly,
up.
well, if I get emotional, I'm not arguing that it's my emotion that makes the difference. I'm saying there's certain criminals that are so dangerous that the risk of letting them out after they've been properly arrested with probable cause, and a prosecutor thinks he's got enough evidence to prove this to a unanimous jury beyond a reasonable doubt, taking the chance with a murderer or a serial rapist or something is not a wise choice, logically speaking. The odds are he's going to get convicted. This is such a dangerous crime that we cannot jeopardize other victims out there or the same victim getting re-victimized. No,
Jim,
no, no, sir.
I'm
And if
sorry,
that
Jim.
we're wrong, if it turns out that we're wrong, guess what? We can compensate the guy. If it turns out we're right, there's no way I can bring back a dead victim who's been murdered. There's no way I'm going to look some rape victim. I understand, Mr. Valliant, that this rapist charged with serial rape was let out, and during the pendency of this case, he raped me. No, no, no,
I get it, but then hold on. But we've got shall not be deprived of life, liberty, and property without due process of law.
This is due process of law.
Assumed innocent until presumed innocent until proven guilty,
So we can't
and
arrest him
excessive
for
bail will
probable
not
cause?
know because you can provide a bond, a bail. That is to assure you go to court. It's not the job pre-trial of the courts to judge somebody being guilty and to protect society from them.
Well, no, we are making some prejudgments. We're making prejudgments about whether you're subject to trial and how much. Even you apparently think that bail is a good idea. We're making.
I do. I think that bail is for its purpose to make sure you come to court, not to keep people who haven't been convicted of crimes indefinitely off the street because a prosecutor thinks they're guilty, which the prosecutor, of course, thinks they're guilty or he wouldn't be charging them. But if that's all that's necessary, then why just dispense with the trial?
No, we don't need to dispense with it. No, 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 no. And he has a right to a speedy public trial. And you know what normally slows down a quote speedy trial?
I do. And I also know,
court, because the defendant coming into court and saying, I need more time. I waive my right to a speedy trial. He's the 9 times out of 10.
What about the 10th one, though, Jim?
There are times when the prosecutor asks for a continuance.
Yes, for cause. We have cause that
Right.
we need to extend this. And look, I'm all for if someone's convicted of a crime and they're guilty, I'm no soft on crime guy, not even close, right? All I'm saying is that if we're going to adhere to the principles of innocent until proven guilty, cannot be deprived of your life, liberty, and process without due life, liberty, and property without due process of law, and excessive bail shall not be required. Those three principles combined mean you cannot use bail as a weapon to keep people off the street.
Well, but we used bail because it's part of our due process, and our Supreme Court, even when it federalized, in the 1960s, criminal procedure was essentially federalized because now the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments were applied against the states, and so now all states had to apply to the right standard. And guess what? All my life, and even before that, bail was used. It was considered part of due process. It was consistent with the presumption of innocence. There has to be a standard met before you're arrested, a standard met before you're charged, and of course, you have a right to a jury trial, a speedy and public jury trial. That is due process. And if you're just going to
If it was on its own, I would agree. If that were the only operative principle, but I'm talking about the cumulative effect. And as a prosecutor convicting people, you know about the cumulative effect. The cumulative effect of due process of law, presumption of innocence, and excessive bail should not be required means you cannot use bail as a weapon to keep people off the street. Now, this is an important question, Jim. So Christopher Smith, who's great, by the way, I love him. He says, not in a companion kind of way, but nevertheless, nice guy. He says, what about police find a dude over a pile of corpses with tons of evidence? The same principle applies. Either we're innocent until proven guilty before a jury or we're not. You simply cannot determine somebody's guilty with just voila, you're guilty.
If the crime is serious, do you think that might merit higher bail? Because of the greater
yes, because there's a greater risk of flight.
There we go. So what you seem to be arguing is that it shouldn't be used as excessively as a bludgeon. You're not opposed to bail as such.
No. I'm opposed to using bail in the way that it's often argued it should be used, as a means to keep people off the street because they're criminals.
Arbitrarily keep using it to keep people off the street. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. No, in fact, if it's a bunch of, and circling back to homeless people, if it's a bunch of little misdemeanor or infraction warrants that they have, which so many homeless people have, come on, let's just clear it out and get that guy out of jail and get him to the right program or the right homeless shelter, because that's the best way to handle. The jail is not the appropriate place to handle normal vagrancy, it seems to me. And so we would be very aggressive about that. If we're talking about a serious crime, and I know a murder or a rape actually happened, and we've got evidence that this is the guy who did it, then yeah, protecting the public while the trial is pending is a vital issue and a real one that cannot be ignored. If I'm charging someone with murder or rape, charging them in court, mind you, that means that whether it goes by grand jury indictment or by a preliminary hearing, both of which happen pretty early on in the proceeding, you've got a right in California, for example, like most states, a felony goes either by grand jury indictment or it goes by a preliminary hearing that has to happen within 10 court days of the arraignment. Now,
okay, Jim. So would you justify this? And I'm going to interrupt here, even though people don't like when I do it. But unfortunately, as much as I love Jim, if I don't occasionally interrupt, I'll never get a word in edgewise. Sure. So Jim knows, and he tells me just interrupt. So I'm taking advantage. The same arguments can be used, Jim. If the police had they didn't have time to get a warrant, they didn't have time to establish probable cause, but they've got a very, very strong indication that a given house has weapons in it. Weapons that house that these people are now going to use to commit a serious crime. So do away with the Fourth Amendment in those instances. No. Just go on in. Why worry about it? The public safety is paramount.
No. Even if we believe there's guns or whatever is in that murder evidence, a dead body in that house, you can't enter a private residence. This is standard black letter search and seizure law, unless there's exigent circumstances. That is to say, you saw someone commit a crime and they ran into the house, or you hear screams happening from within there. He's killing me. He's killing me. unless you got exigent circumstances like that, if it's a house, you set up a perimeter, and if it's 2 in the morning, you get a judge to issue a warrant.
Yes, because it's the law, and we judge that the risk of those people disposing with the evidence is outweighed by the risk of violating the Fourth
Correct.
Amendment.
Correct.
And that's all I'm
How
saying.
many
It's the
times was I
same
on
principle.
search
It's the
warrant
same
duty?
principle.
Yeah, how many times did I have the search warrant duty where the detective would call me up literally at 2 or 3 in the morning, wake me up and say, "Can we swear out? Tell me, just give me the thumbnail on what happened here." Well, we've got the house surrounded. I need a search warrant. Can you wake up Judge so and so, who's on judge duty? I was on DA duty, and so they'd explain it to me. We'd swear out a warrant, and I'd say, "Now
Right.
you get that inventory back in by tomorrow morning for the judge to see."
Yes, despite the risk of waiting in such circumstances, you do so because the higher principle is that you are safe in your what's the word? I don't remember what the hell it is now, but you're safe in your home. They actually have a word in the Fourth Amendment,
Well,
but
there's a level of require.
you're safe there because
Yeah.
we don't want to give that kind of power. And what I'm saying is that yes, it's dangerous to let somebody out of prison that to make a bail that you know is a criminal, but it's more dangerous to give the power to judges, prosecutors, and cops to keep people in prison based on their judgment alone without a jury's finding.
If it were their judgment alone, I would agree with you. But if we have layers of protection, the cop, the requirement on his, because remember, if he got evidence in violation of the Fourth Amendment, that'll be suppressed to the exclusionary rule. Something else we might debate someday. Or, so he better know what the hell he's doing. His reputation is also on the line. If he wants me as the prosecutor to file his cases, he better start appeasing me too. That's why the local DA has such power over these cops, is because they want their cases filed. And I don't have to file their
Jim,
case.
you talking about there being layers to me means nothing because I have enough experience with cops, prosecutors, and judges to know that regardless of the layers, and you know it, and while you were a person of steadfast integrity, and while I know cops who are, many aren't. They don't care. The prosecutor doesn't give a shit. What they want is the conviction. They're convinced that the guy's guilty, and that's all there is to it. So if they have to, when I went to trial, and look, I was guiltier than sin, right? I'm not here to defend myself. Every cop that took that stand lied. And they lied because they thought lying was justified because they knew I was guilty. And the problem is, what if I wasn't? And we have our system, and it's based on, I believe, Voltaire, that it's better for 100 guilty men to go free than one innocent man to go to prison.
And I agree with that principle. I absolutely, we require proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That's reasonable certainty. And we require unanimous jury in criminal cases. And so we do have judges and juries, thank goodness, who evaluate. And I have had the unpleasant experience of having to call police officers liars in my closing arguments. So I wasn't always on the cop's side. I mean, you want an experience as a prosecutor?
No, but you're a unicorn, Jim.
I may be a unicorn, but I also have to convince. It's not just reality and me and my integrity and looking in the mirror. I know I have to convince that jury, a unanimous jury, who, if they have but one reasonable doubt, must vote not guilty. They may think he's probably guilty, very probably guilty. But if there's a doubt that's lodged in the evidence, a reasonable, non-arbitrary, subjectivist would say a non-arbitrary doubt, they have to say not guilty, even for that one little doubt. Sure, he's probably guilty, but I have this reasonable doubt. That's a not guilty. And a unanimous jury is required. And we've got layers of, it's true. Frequently what will happen is that you don't have the same judge, and normally you won't have the same judge who presides over the sort of monitoring the grand jury or does the preliminary hearing and does the motions on the case and does the jury trial. And we've got the jury, and that does take time. It's true.
Jim, I have to address this. I'm sorry, but we've got a couple minutes, and this is like the most ridiculous thing I've seen. Okay. Michael finally understands the nature of the vicious prosecutors willing to lie to unfairly convict Trump. No, you know what Michael understands, Scott? Michael understands that blacks in this country have been complaining about the unfair FBI, the unfair police, and the unfair prosecutions for decades, while conservatives told them to man up, take responsibilities for their lives, and stop complaining and blaming other people. But now that it's your guy that it happened to, all of a sudden you think it's a problem. So instead of trying to point out my hypocrisy, which isn't there, perhaps, sir, just grab yourself a mirror. And with that, I am going to turn it over to the great Jim Valliant. Unfortunately, Jim, we can't talk about the juvenile crime and we can't talk about the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine because we're out of time and I have other things to do, as I'm sure you do. So give us our capitalist thought of the day, sir.
Ooh, wow. Geez, that's really a challenge. Capitalism depends, though, on an enforcement of criminal law, the protection of rights. A world of freedom is a world in which violence and property crime is minimized or eliminated. The goal of government in doing that is to create the condition of freedom. And it is that condition that makes capitalism possible. All these wonderful things that have happened since the Enlightenment, since the Industrial Revolution, have been predicated on a society of freedom. And freedom requires government. And government means we ban physical force. And as a prosecutor for almost 18 years, I knew that I wasn't creating a new widget or writing a symphony or a poem, but what I was doing was making the conditions possible so that other people could pursue their productive endeavors in freedom. That is to say, in a world where coercion is absent, where their bodies and their property were held inviolable, at least by the law. Do we get it perfect every time? No, we don't. But at least with the stuff that Michael and I are talking about here, the 4th, 5th, 6th Amendments, were an effort to turn criminal law into a rational exercise so that innocent people, which is far more important that innocent people not get convicted. I agree with Voltaire and the standard trope there. It's far more important that innocent people not get convicted, but it's also important, very important, that the environment be free enough so that productive people, free enough, freedom is the condition for this productiveness and this progress, free enough so that they can pursue their own happiness, pursue their own improvement and industry, as Thomas Jefferson might say. A coercion-free society is a precondition for capitalism and its progress.
Well said, sir. And Jim, thank you so much for, on such a short notice to coming on the show. I may need, hopefully you'll be available because I'm probably going to need you again now that Mark has this new gig out there in Toronto. But for the audience, thank you also for being with us today. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. And remember to share it from YouTube. And for God's sake, go to the YouTube station, leave some comments there. That's awesome. Diego, yes, I do read your comments. I just don't always read them out loud. But yes, so, and also go to AmericanCapitalistParty.com, and we will see you in a little less than 23 hours. And please remember to check your premises. Thank you.